What's up, everybody? Brad here, and it is Friday, and this has been a week for well, it's been a pretty dang good week if you are a fan of Microsoft, Xbox, gaming, and some other stuff. Last week was all about Microsoft Ignite. We had a lot of good enterprise, a lot of good corporate content coming out, and this week has all been about the gamer for primarily most of the audience. I mean, there's definitely some other stuff, which we'll talk about here in a second. But if you want to jump ahead a little bit, check out those timestamps down below. But diving in here, Disney Plus is now available. Now, you probably already know that actually Disney is saying they've got 10 million subscribers already, which is that's a big deal. But they've also got a ton of content. I subscribe to it because I have a small child and she loves all the content, and plus we get all the movies that we've already bought available to us once again through another platform. But anyways, it's now available if that's your thing. Bigger news is actually the return of the Motorola Razr. If you're familiar with the old iconic Razr, it's back and it's an affordable thing and it's $1,500 and you're probably not going to buy one. Don't get me wrong. I think this is a neat device. I like Motorola, what they're trying to do here, trying to bring back some nostalgia, trying to take their own flavor, if you will, on a foldable device. Now, it does have a plastic display, just like the Samsung Galaxy Fold and the Huawei phones, but it's in a different form factor. It's something that actually I could honestly see myself using one day if it was much cheaper, because you're giving up a lot of sacrifices here. One, the camera is not all that good on it. Two, it's really expensive. Like I said, $1,500. You can go get a top-end Galaxy Note or an iPhone for that kind of money. And it's a neat, like, kind of hero type device, but I don't think it's all that practical. We'll see if the price ever comes down in the future. But the killer part of the whole thing is that it runs a Snapdragon 710 processor, so you're not even getting the latest and greatest from Qualcomm. You're getting just sort of a mid-range, even kind of a lower end chip at this point. Also launching this week is the Apple announced their new 16-inch MacBook Pro, which is fine. If that's what you're looking for, they can ramp it up to like $6,000, but you can get a lot for that kind of money, like 8 terabytes of SSD, a whole bunch of ridiculous amounts of RAM. It's, I'm sure, a nice device, and they're telling us that they have finally fixed the keyboard. They've finally done it. The one thing I do find hilarious is that the reviewers or people who got early access to the hardware are making a big deal that the escape key is now back, because Apple, for reasons only Apple will know, took it away and put it on that touch bar, and now it's back. And now that should not be a point of conversation. Anyways, what would be nice is if they just got rid of the touch bar entirely. I'm not a big fan of it. I have used Macs with or a MacBook Pro with it, and it's not my cup of tea. I'd rather have dedicated keys that I can remap. But that is aside from the point. Apple will never fully go back. At least they're not willing to admit that yet. The bigger thing, and I'm not going to try to make this too political, is that Phil Schiller made a really dumb comment saying that, hey, basically, if you don't use a Mac in school or an iPad in school, your child is going to be underperforming, underachieving. And then if you can't splash down the cash, your kid is basically going to be left behind by all the kids who can. And that's a very dense statement. And he did a great job of taking the limelight away from Apple's new hardware and turning it into this political issue where he was basically just looking down on people who can't afford their products because they don't, or they just don't want them. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with buying a Chromebook to foster your education. There's a lot of good stuff on the internet, and it can all be accessed via a browser. So there you go. Microsoft is also reportedly working on 64-bit app emulation for ARM. This is a surprise to exactly 0 people. This device right here runs 32-bit emulation, or containerized apps, if you will, or whatever you want to call it. But they don't run 64-bit Intel AMD apps. They do run 64-bit ARM apps, but not Intel AMD. And they're working on that emulation, supposedly coming in a little over a year. We'll see if that materializes. That's a pretty big leap, but it's very little surprise that Microsoft is trying to work on that, because if they can again get that perfected on this type of hardware, it makes ARM a much more viable platform for the company, makes that Surface Pro X just a little bit better. Windows 10 1909 is also now available. If you go and do settings and search for updates and you keep smashing that button, it will eventually show up. Microsoft is being very aggressive, and I will tell you, it only takes a couple minutes to install. It's a very small file, and there's not a lot in there. So don't think this is going to some sort of major feature update, because it is exactly opposite of that. It will require a restart, so keep that in mind. And if you're in the corporate world, you might want to wait just a little bit before rolling this thing out. While Microsoft is confident that it will not screw up your machine, they're also confident about the one that went out last year at this time that was deleting OneDrive data. So, you might just want to sit and wait just a few minutes. In a poll of Americans, by the way, Microsoft was listed as the most ethical company in the country, which is, there's no real bad way to spin that. It's good for Microsoft. People think that they're an ethical company, and that's a good thing. And also, I was among, there was several of us who like tweeted this all out at the same time. We all got the tip around the same time. Harry Shum is leaving Microsoft. He was the head of their AI division, and that will be transferred over to, I believe, Kevin Scott early next year, if not immediate. I think actually he's immediately taking over, but I think Harry Shum will be slowly transitioning out of that role over the next 2 months or so. He's been there for a while. I want to say over 20 years. So that's a lot of knowledge lost, if you will, from the Microsoft org. But the big event this week, and I think this was bigger, candidly, by my own impressions. I knew there were going to be some big announcements, but I didn't think it was going to be kind of this big. So there's a couple things going on in the gaming world. Next week, we have Stadia launching, right? We have Stadia, Google's thing is coming on November 19th, and there's some features that are missing, which I did a video earlier and a post earlier this week on it, but things like achievements aren't going to be there. Your family sharing, so you can't share it with your kids, and a couple other notable things will be coming, but they're not available. There's also only 12 games available on day one, but that's not the end of the world because there's going to be a bunch more by the end of the year. All that being said, Stadia is coming next week. Now, Microsoft headed to London this week, and this weekend, if you're in the area, they're having their XO19 event. Now, on yesterday, they did a live stream, a show, if you will, that talked about all of the announcements that are going to be talked about at XO this weekend. And there are a lot. So right off the bat, they came out of the gate saying, hey, xCloud beta users like myself, or preview program as Microsoft likes to call it, you can now play 50 games. And they're not just like unknown games. Like, these are pretty big titles, including like Madden and some others. If you're in the xCloud preview program, go check it out. It used to be 4 titles, and now it's 50. Conveniently, Stadia is only launching on 12 titles. Microsoft now has 50 on theirs. That is not a coincidence, folks. This is very strategic on Microsoft's part to have this event at this time, I believe, and to announce all this xCloud stuff, because we're not there. So there's 50 new titles. Big deal. What's the big deal? Microsoft also announced that xCloud is going to be a part of Game Pass. Now, they didn't give us all the details yet. They just said, hey, it's going to be part of Game Pass. What they didn't tell us, and I don't have any hints leading one way or another, is if there's going to be 2 tiers of Game Pass. Is there just going to be Game Pass Peasant, which is where you can just go play, all your Game Pass titles? Or is there like Game Pass Pro, where then you can then stream and play and do all that stuff? I don't think they're doing that, because that would get real mucky with Xbox Ultimate, which they also talked about, which we'll talk about here in a second, but I think that would muck up the waters quite a bit. So, but anyways, xCloud is going to be part of Game Pass, and as long as it stays at the same rate, I think that's going to be a killer deal. They also announced that, hey, if you've already bought a game, you can stream it from xCloud. Just go ahead and do it. Like, that's a pretty cool feature right there in itself. Now, I did have a tip last week that I didn't write up or even talk about, because I couldn't quite lock it down, and it's a good thing I didn't go with it, and you'll see why here. Microsoft announced this week that with Game Pass Ultimate, you are now getting 1 month of EA access and 3 months of Discord Nitro. Yes, Discord Nitro. We'll talk about that here in a second. And 6 months of Spotify Premium included as part of the member benefit. So you get 6 months Spotify Premium, you get Discord Nitro, 1 month of EA access. That's a pretty dang good deal if you are part of Game Pass Ultimate. The good thing here, folks, is that is for new and existing users. So this is for everybody. Everybody who's using Game Pass Ultimate gets this stuff. The tip that I got, circling back to that, was that, hey, Microsoft and Discord are going to announce something at XO19, and there was some kind of mucky little information about there. And you could imagine if I would have gone out with a post today, Microsoft and Discord are going to announce something at XO, everyone would have assumed acquisition. Microsoft really played up how well they think that Discord is the conversation of or the communities where gamings exist, right? It's where people go to talk about games and all that, and Discord is a premium thing, and that's why they're tying it into Game Pass Ultimate. And then it kind of sounded like, hey, I was waiting for them to say, and we're buying them. They did not go that far, and I'm sure Microsoft has talked about internally buying Discord, and I'm sure they've approached them, or there was something going on there, but I'd heard that they were going to do a collaboration, and they did, but it was only for Discord Nitro, and it's exciting, but not that exciting, if you know what I mean. Other big things that were announced. Wasteland 3, which they showed off with new visuals, is coming in the spring. Halo Reach is coming on December 3rd for Xbox and PC. Game Pass, xCloud is also coming to the PC as well in 2020. They're also working on their iOS apps, but no specific dates available. Just, I think they talked about this stuff just to reassure people that yes, xCloud is coming to iOS, and yes, xCloud is coming to the PC. It's just not ready yet. They're sticking to the Android app for now. Kingdom Hearts 1.5, 2.5, and 2.8 are coming to Xbox One in 2020. Age of Empires 4 was showing off, and I gotta tell you, this one looks... As long as they didn't screw up the mechanics that made Age of Empires great, like I would love it if they just took Age of Empires and just totally revamped the visuals, which what they've shown off so far, I would be all about it. As long as they didn't make it overly complex. Overly complex meaning like resource management and all that stuff. It looks really, really dang legit. They also showed off a new flight sim trailer with the Boeing 747 and a couple other airplanes. Once again, I'm very excited about this. The only thing missing was a revival of the Sidewinder brand showing off their joysticks, but that I haven't heard anything about that yet. Yeah, and so there was a ton more announced. There were just a lot of games. This was a big event for Microsoft, and I think they got a lot of credit for coming out, like, because this just, I don't want to say this came out of nowhere. They've been talking about XO19 for a while, but I mean, they had the whole crew. They had Larry there, they had Phil there, they had a lot of presenters. Oh yeah, a whole bunch of Final Fantasy games coming to Xbox, including some of the best titles, which Phil Spencer says they're still working on, but I believe there's like 10 titles or something crazy like that. So Final Fantasy games starting to show up on Xbox, which is another big win, and Game Pass for that matter. And so lots of good stuff. Also, Microsoft announced in the gaming world that Minecraft Earth is now available in early access in the United States. So when you look at all those announcements that I just rammed through, and I don't know, in just a couple minutes, XO19 was jam-packed, and this was very well timed to the release of Stadia. Well, I don't think Microsoft is overly concerned with what Google is doing at this point. They have to be, eyes wide open. They can't be ignorant of what Google is doing. And while the fact that Stadia is launching next week and Microsoft is now shipping 50 titles on xCloud, going to let you stream your own games that you've already bought, I think that's a bigger deal than a lot of people realize, because you've already bought these games and invested in them. Why would you go to another streaming platform if you've already got some titles on the streaming platform? You guys know what I mean at this point. And so XO19, Microsoft put a good foot forward for the wrapping up pretty much the Xbox. I think that's probably the last major announcements, because it's the last event. Phil Spencer even said on stage, he says, hey, we don't do a lot of these events. It should be pretty much par for the course going forward that we announce new titles and release dates at all of our events, because again, they don't do a ton of gaming related keynotes every year. And so when they do, clearly, as they did in London, they go big, or they will go back to Seattle. And in this case, they went big. And so it was a good event. I mean, if you're an Xbox fan or just a general gaming fan, hopefully you got something good about it. Oh, the other thing too that they also announced, which again, not all that surprising, xCloud here will support the PS4 DualShock controller. I was looking at the DualShock, seeing if it was ready yet, but it's not quite there yet. That will be coming to xCloud support too. So if that's your cup of tea, there you go. You've got all that stuff. So that's a quick nutshell of what is going on with XO19. And let me pull up the questions this week. Just a handful of them. Refresh the thread. But it's a good week if you're a gamer. There's kind of really no other way to describe it. All right. Dave says, I'm looking to buy a laptop sometime over the next year. I consider 3:2 aspect ratio and 16 gigabyte of RAM to be perfect. Do you have any shopping tips or strategies as I continue to scour the internet for reviews and lists? I love my Surface Book 1 and consider upgrading to the newest as the expensive option, but I'm finding it difficult to search for and compare 3:2 laptops. Any tips? So 3:2 is more of just a kind of a surface thing. I agree. I very much prefer it over 16:9, especially for productivity related tasks. Here's my one tip at this point. Don't buy a Surface Book 2 because I think that's going to get refreshed here potentially in the spring. So I don't think I would buy a Surface Book 2 because I think you're going to buy one and then it's going to get refreshed and then you're going to be upset. So really what that leaves you to is kind of a Surface Laptop 3 if you really need to get something before the holidays. So if you have a Surface Book 1, I would personally look at potentially a 15-inch Surface Book 3, but make sure you get the Intel variant. Don't buy the AMD one. I don't think you're going to be happy with the AMD option. That's pretty much I'm sure there are other 3x2 laptops out there, but most of them are 16:9. If you need a good resource for checking things out, Wirecutter is one that I use frequently, not necessarily for technology, but for just general things, in general. So you could go there. And this is any updates from MS Ignite about PWAs. I don't believe so, and any specific change in strategy, if that is what you're hitting at. Greg Edwards says, any idea when the Surface earbuds will be available? No, I haven't. Also, what about the new smart speaker they teased a while back? I think the smart speaker you're referring to is the one that they showed off, was it last year at Ignite, where it sat in a conference room and then did all the voice translations and all that stuff. I think that stuff is just being built into Surface Hub. Although we have not actually heard anything specific where what we at the time referred to as a cone of shame, because this thing was it looked like it was like 3 feet tall, and it looked like the Shard in London. If you're familiar with the Shard, looks like it kind of looked like that thing. And no, we haven't heard anything about it. Oh geez, Ellendale, Dine. 2.5 questions. 2.5 Men was also a decent show. Do you know if a Surface Book 3 or Surface Book 2 performance base will be coming out soon or ever? It definitely will be coming out. I've heard time and time again from multiple people that Surface Book 3 is a thing and coming. It turns out it's super hard to find a touchscreen laptop with a dedicated GPU. Buying a $3,200 laptop with a 1060 seems like a bad reason. Even with Black Friday sales at Best Buy, Microsoft still clocks in at $3,000. If they're not coming out with any time soon, do you have any laptops or touchscreen monitors or a 20 series GPU? Like I said a bit ago, I would wait until the spring. Unless for some reason you have a dire need to get one this holiday shopping season, I would try to hold out, because I know for a fact that Surface Book 3 is happening. I just don't know exactly when it's happening. But I keep hearing that spring is about the right time. Any idea when more xCloud invites are going out? Oh yeah, I still forgot. So Microsoft said at XO19, by the way, new regions like including Western Europe, Canada, India, and I think there's one more, maybe Japan, are coming online soon. So when those regions go online, more invites should be going out. I don't know exactly when more invites will be going out. I know that if you're at XO19, they are handing out some invites over there. So if you're potentially in London, you could check that out. And then he says, Psy Choker says, hey Brad, 2 questions. Will there ever be a 3-in-1 from Microsoft? A phone plus a tablet plus a laptop plus a desktop continuum when used in continuous mode? I don't know about a 3-in-1. I think the closest thing we're going to get is Surface Neo, which is kind of a phone-like, tablet-like, potentially continuum-like device. I think that's probably the closest we'll get. I was going to say Surface Duo, but Surface Duo doesn't really run Windows. It runs Android, so it's not quite a Microsoft 3-in-1, even if they did make that a possibility. Will it be possible to run the same app twice on Surface Duo? So here's the thing Surface Duo is, I don't want to call it vaporware because I've physically held this thing and we've all seen it, but there's so many things we don't know. And what he wants to know is, will it be possible to run the same app twice on a Surface Duo? Then I still don't know if Android is really good for multitasking than it is on Windows 10. You can open certain applications multiple times. For example, 2 PDFs side by side. What we do know out of the Surface Duo camp is that Microsoft is building their first-party apps to run in a split-screen mode that makes sense. Now, can you open 2 of them at the same time? Until we get our hands on one and we get more time than 30 seconds of just looking but not touching, it's really hard to say at this point. And Mr. PKI rounds it up with, if Microsoft is working on 64-bit emulation for ARM, would it be best to wait before considering a Surface Pro X? So here's his point. Microsoft is working on 64-bit emulation. Will it work on this device? We don't know. So should you wait and see? Here's the thing, you could be waiting a very long time. If you need a Surface Pro X today, I think today is probably one of the best times to buy one because it'll be just about as long as it is before that device gets refreshed. Should you wait until 64-bit emulation? If you don't need one now, don't buy one now. I think that's kind of my approach, because while 64-bit emulation might be about a year away, it could arrive and it could also be terrible. And then you've just waited a year and now you technically have it, but it's bad. So this one is, I don't have a perfect answer, but my answer is, if you need a Surface Pro X now, buy one now. Don't wait. So there you go. Good questions as always, folks. This has been a crazy week of gaming news. Microsoft is really out there striking at Stadia, making sure that everyone knows that xCloud is the superior option. We're still waiting to hear from other gaming companies about when they are going to fully enter the streaming kind of platform wars, if you will. But Stadia launches next week. Once I get my hands on my controller and the gaming and all that stuff, I'll definitely have a deeper write-up and video about it, and we'll be talking about it in the podcast, I'm sure. xCloud rolling out more games. That's a pretty dang big deal. Microsoft is clearly confident that xCloud is starting to work at the levels that they want, and it also means that they have a dial just back there. They're like, we'll just enable some more games. It's clearly not that big of a deal because they went from 4 to 50 overnight. So there you go, guys. That wraps it up for this week. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch all of you right back here next time.